Mafia Meta with our hosts Mango and myself. Can we get a sound check? Make sure you guys can hear Mango now.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I see it on OBS now. So they should be able to hear you. Chat, can you hear Mango?
Test, test. Can you hear me? Doesn't seem like it.
Okay, cool. They can hear you.
Okay. All right. So did they miss everything I said so far?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I was saying I don't know what I'm doing on the show because Neal is a mafia expert. Him always being mafia as usual. But I'll try to do my best. Um, so one of the things that a lot of people ask me when they're starting out as mafia is how do I get better at being the mafia role? So, being town is a lot easier, especially as a beginner. Like Thunder Toss covered last week, um, you just have to convince the rest of the town that you are town. You have to remove yourself from the circle of suspicion, right? That's your primary goal, especially as a beginner mafia. You shouldn't try too hard, to be an expert at sniffing out the mafia. That comes with experience, or if you're really good at reading people. But for the most part, you just want to remove yourself as a suspect. So as mafia, there's a lot more pressure. A lot of people think you have to be really good at lying or manipulating people. Once you get a lot of experience, that may be the case. But in the beginning, the only advice I can give people is you have to convince yourself that you're town. Like it's not just you have to play as town. You have to convince yourself, like completely, that you're town, so that when someone like jumps out at you and accuses you, right? Your instinct is like, what the fuck, I'm town. You have to have like a visceral reaction as town. You can't kind of like fumble around and like try to come up with a defense. Like right away, your reaction has to be like as if you're playing town.
Yeah, you don't
Um,
want to think what would town do in this situation. You want to already be thinking I am town.
right,
It's
right.
a slight mindset change.
Yep. So that should be your foundation for everything. Obviously, as the number of people narrow down and you're alive, you have to start thinking of like you know at a certain point you can almost ignore that. Once you have the numbers on your side, you can be a little bit more aggressive. But until then, that should be your foundation. Um, some other things that you want to think about is so I think Thundertoss also mentioned this last time, but you know when when you're playing with your mafia teammates, obviously you know who the mafia is, right? And you're trying to play as town. So when your mafia teammates say something that should be obvious that it's a slip up, or is pro mafia instead of pro town, um, you should definitely call them out, right? Like don't be afraid to like bust your teammates or call them out, but also you have to also keep yourself in check. So to you it's super obvious that they just like fucked up, right? So your first instinct, if you completely convince yourself that you're town, is to be like that guy is like 100% mafia, right? But it might not be as obvious to town, right? Because they don't know with 100% certainty that they're mafia just like you do. So you have to kind of find that middle ground where you kind of have to cover your ass, so that later on, if they mess up more, and then the town lynches them, that you have to be like, hey, I was the first one that called that guy out, and that kind of covers you. So, and later on, a cop could check that guy, right, and then it just gives you a little bit more, credence that you're pro town instead of pro mafia.
And when you're making decisions as mafia on who to, cast suspicion on, if you're opting to cast suspicion on someone who's not suspicious, that is, if you're trying to direct town's attention, never direct it towards or away from your other mafia members if you can help it. Ignore your other mafia members as players, because if you try and protect someone or you try and push on someone, it establishes a link between the two of you in people's minds. So it's best to just kind of like ignore your fellow mafia members and go after other people, or defend non-mafia members, at least in the beginning, because you don't want to create links between you and others. I mean, if they're mafia, because then if someone catches on to you, then now you're incriminating other people either by going after them too hard or by defending them too hard.
All right, so a good strategy for beginner mafia is, a lot of times you can get people on your side just by saying that you trust them. So I mean, this works up to a certain level, right? Up to a certain level, you can kind of, form like town circles with people saying, hey, I'm 100% sure Neal is town, right? And then because they're town, right, they somehow like feel almost obligated to find like a reciprocal, like, town feeling to you, so you can take advantage of that. Obviously, um, at a certain experience level, if I try this on like someone that's like really experienced at mafia, um, that might actually trigger like an alarm saying, hey, why is this guy trying to get on my side? So, be careful like how you use it, but that is one strategy that you can use.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot that goes into mafia, as you can see. You basically everything that from the last week's discussion on Pro Town applies to you, and then on top of that, you have what we were saying, where you wanted the awkwardness of trying to out people or get people to trust you. I mean, basically, playing Mafia is hard, and it can get really stressful. And sometimes people don't know how to respond accordingly to when they're asked if they're Mafia. Some people, when too much suspicion gets cast on them, they just say, "Fuck it, I'm Mafia. My fellow Mafia members, please do this when I die." And that can be.
I mean, I've done that too,
Yeah.
so like I'm actually like, people who really know me well, as far as like playing mafia goes, they think of me as a super strong town, um, and actually a weak mafia. But the trick to actually eventually become a good mafia is to perfect your town play, and then convince yourself that you're town, when you're mafia,
Hmm.
and play the same way. So I mean, there's different like metas as you go on. So let's say you get a reputation as being a really good town. So the way that like I've kind of abused that as mafia or taken advantage of it is, people say, "Oh, Mango is too suspicious," you know. I mean, it's too. I'm sorry, it's too valuable. As town, we should never lynch him first round or even second round. We should keep him around, and hopefully the cop will check him later, or if he gets us too suspicious later on, we'll vote him out. So I try to use the early rounds to be aggressive, which is 100% in line with my town play, and then I try to get people voted out that are obviously town, right? And when I go after people, I usually go after the weaker mafia players, as in they're not good at defending themselves. They're not good at being good towns, right? So certain people, right? You never want to fake accuse as mafia, saying, "Oh, like I think this guy's suspicious," or even fake claim as cop and say, "I checked him and he's mafia," because there are people who you know when they play the win as town, right? You can tell in their voice and how they react right away. When you're about to vote them off, they will convince everyone
Who do you think
that.
are some of those players?
Well, um, so I'll give you a story actually. We were playing, I think, a year or two ago at BlizzCon, and the moderator rigged it so that the mafia were me, Hotbit, and Victor, so Liquid Nazgul, right? So he put like three really high profile people as mafia just to see how it would go. But that's actually a disadvantage because a cop would probably check those people in the first three rounds. So I knew that I had to be aggressive. So I came out as fake cop right away. And what I did was I accused the gun run, saying, I'm the cop and he's mafia. And it just happened that the gun run was actually the cop, right? And the thing with the gun run is he's actually a pretty bad mafia player because he's terrible at lying, right? Like, he's not someone that's, manipulative. he wears his heart on his sleeve. He's very truthful, right? So when he came out and said, "Oh, like I don't know what's going on, but like I'm really the cop," like he didn't even like accuse me back, saying that you know that I must be mafia. Like he just convinced everyone right away with his first sentence, and like the way that he was acting and his like facial expression, that he was obviously the cop. So like, yeah, I totally screwed myself with that. And in retrospect, I should have never picked someone like the gun run. So it's not even like you don't want. It's not even like you don't want to accuse the people who are good at mafia. You don't want to accuse the people that people will easily get convinced that they're town. So.
Yeah. So let's talk about the strangeness that is deciding on who to kill at night as Mafia, because there's a lot of ways that meta can go. You'll see a lot of times that someone who's come out as cop, or someone who, if two cops come out and there's like a sketchiness between the two of them, one's clearly faking, the other might be faking, might not be faking. You'll notice that Mafia tends to leave both cops alive, because if they kill one cop, then it's clear that the other was faking. Or sometimes even if a cop comes out when no one else comes out as cop, you'll see Mafia members leave that cop alive during the night phase. And often we do that, or Mango's team does that, whoever's playing Mafia that time. They'll do that just to cast suspicion, because if someone comes out as cop and says, "Hey guys, I found this person," and especially if they find two people in a row, and I found this guy, it makes them really, really suspicious as cop.
Right. So, I mean, it's obviously situational, but a lot of times what actually happens, and the reason why we actually keep the cop alive is, we're always worried that as soon as the cop comes out alive, the medic is still alive, and they'll save the cop, right? So it's kind of in some ways a win-win in the short term, in that if the cop stays alive, and people think, let's say, the medic is dead, or the cop is suspicious, the longer that he stays alive, the more suspicion there is, and the more you can turn the town against the cop. But at a certain point, the cop is going to get too many checks, and then you have to take the risk of, trying to take out the cop and hoping that you got the medic on the previous turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Do you want to take some questions from chat?
Yep, sure.
Chat, do you have any questions for us? Is there ever a situation where it's a good idea to fake call cop and sacrifice a fellow Mafia member for the greater good and all that?
Yeah, so definitely, especially if there's an obviously suspicious guy that everyone is in agreement, but for some reason, he didn't get voted out for something, right? Let's say a vote was called the previous round, and for some reason it narrowly failed, right? A good idea would be to fake claim and then say that you checked him, and hopefully you voted for him as well the previous round, and then you get the trust of the town. So
yeah. So my only issue with that is it depends on what round. I would never do that round 1 or round 2, because the cop is probably still alive round 1 or round 2. So if you fake cop, even if you're trying to kill an actual Mafia as fake cop, the real cop is going to be like, "What the fuck? He's faking. I'm the real cop. This guy's clearly Mafia." In which case you're screwing yourself over, and then he's eventually going to check that other guy, probably that night. And then he's like, "Oh, he was Mafia too." And then they get 2 Mafia kills right away. So you have to be really careful with your fake cops. You have to be really careful. You either have to go early and be like, "Hey guys, I'm cop, I checked this person, he's Mafia," and then be like, "Oh," and then when the actual cop comes out, be like, "He's just trying to cover, he's trying to fake." Or you have to wait until you think the cop is dead. The first one is really hard to do, to come out before the other cop and convince everyone else that the real cop isn't real. That's a hard move to pull off, and you almost have to just come out early in a round and be very assertive, but not overly aggressive. You never want to be aggressive, you want to be assertive.
So there are certain game setups where the math works that it actually helps the Mafia to early claim. So let's say there's 4 Mafia with 2 kill power. 4 Mafia with 2 kill power, and let's say there's 1 or 2 cops and a medic, right? Even if you come out as fake cop and the real cop comes out, right, and they believe the real cop. So you get lynched, right? That brings the mafia down to 3 people, and you still have 2 kill power. So you can actually double stack the cop, and kind of draw out the cop that way. So that's a legit strat. But for the most part, like first or second round, you usually do not want to fake claim when you only have 1 kill power, or they can lynch you and you're down to 1 kill power. So usually it's down the road when you think you have the cop killed. And the benefit of even waiting towards the later rounds is, even if the real cop comes out, the chances that you kill the medic is pretty high. So let's say we're in like the 4th round, and I fake claim and the real cop comes out. Like, I would think that my mafia team would take the risk and try to kill him that night if I got lynched, because the chances that we got the medic is pretty high at that point. So
Yeah. So let's go to the next question. Is there ever a situation where you could fake call medic?
yes, actually. Actually, as town, there is a situation, which happened, I think, a week or two ago. As mafia, yes. So
Yeah.
the thing with medic is, even if it's super unlikely that you're the medic. So let's say it's down to like, usually the later rounds when it's down to like 4 or 5 people or something, right? And they're deciding between 2 people, and they call a vote on you, right? A good move is actually to claim that you're medic, because if they're trying to decide on 2 people and you call medic, it kind of puts the pressure to vote on the other guy, because they don't want to risk it. Even if it's only, let's say, like a 20% chance that you're actually medic, it would be a really, bad town move to vote off a medic, obviously, right? So, I mean, that's a legit case, to fake claim, I guess. Or, to obviously draw out the real medic. That would be the other one, so.
Yeah. Also, if you're being accused of being mafia and it's clear that you're going to lose a vote, you can't hurt yourself. I mean, if you're already in a position where you're going to lose the vote, you're not going to hurt yourself by fake claiming medic. You could help yourself, but it's probably not going to do anything, but you can always try and hope that gives you an extra edge. So
Right. So, I mean, here's the thing, though. The reason why, so it's actually really helpful to Mafia to fake claim, because you can draw out the medic, right? But the problem is, a medic would never claim early because it's suicidal, right? So it's very situational when you have to use it. Usually, it's when they're about to lynch you, and you say, "Hey, I didn't want to come out, but I'm actually the medic." You have to kind of like play that card. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Let's take another question from chat. If you fake claim cop, is it better to call out one of your mafia members as checked as town, or a random townie?
So I remember this was being discussed a couple times in the last few weeks. I think Shindigs said like the correct play is to not involve your mafia teammate, right? But I kind of feel like you should switch it up so that they'll never know, right?
Yeah.
So even if they're convinced that you're actually fake cop, right? Later on, or even when you fake claim, they don't know what to think about the person that you supposedly checked, right? They could be mafia, they could be town. You don't want to be predictable, is what I'm saying. So, like, one game when I fake claimed, the time that I messed up the number of checks, um, yeah, I said Ribo, who was mafia, was clear, and then I said Jason, who was actually town, was clear as well. I said those two are my checks. So I did 1 and 1. I figured, I kind of saved one guy, and maybe I'll get Jason on my side. But unfortunately, I messed up, but somehow I survived that. So
Yeah, somehow. So, as Mango says, it's good to mix it up. I wouldn't put more than one mafia in. If you're at like round 3 or 4, we should have 3 or 4 checks. I would do one mafia and then a couple town. 2 or 3 more town. I wouldn't ever do like 2 or 3 of my Mafia and then one town, because then if they think you ever get outed as Mafia, then all those people are instantly suspicious. So I would be careful with that. Slip in one, maybe one. Um,
Yeah.
okay, what else do we have? Uh, is pushing after quiet people the easiest way to get town lynched as Mafia? If so, does it make you suspicious if you go hard on quiet people?
So this is a tricky one. So in the long term, I think it's good for the game to do it. Only because quiet people kind of suck. I mean, not only for the viewers, right? Because the game becomes slower, and then later on, it's frustrating because there's a bunch of quiet people left, right? Um, but it's bad when you're thinking from the town perspective, right? So let's say whether you're Mafia or your town, and you're convinced you're playing as town, right? Well, I said before, you have to convince the rest of the town that you're not suspicious, right? And how are you going to do that when you're not talking, you're not contributing, right? Like, almost think of it as a real life scenario, and it's a life and death situation, right? You're playing Mafia, IRL, you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna live or die, right? Like, how would you react if someone just stayed quiet and didn't contribute at all when it was a life and death situation? Like, you have to kind of think of it almost like that level. I mean, that's what I do, and that's how I justify killing early people early. I mean, killing quiet people early, because in the long run, it kind of forces them to speak up and raises the level of the game.
Yeah, yeah. I actually can't add anything to that.
And
That's right on.
and I mean, obviously, Mafia. I mean, I've abused that as Mafia, or taken advantage of it by forcing lynches on the quiet people, right? But you know what? That's part of the meta, and like I said, that only helps the game in the long run. So
Yeah. It it gets everyone should. How do I say this? If you're not contributing to the game, you're hurting the game. Is kind of how you should look at it. So if quiet people are not contributing very much, so in the end they're hurting the game, because then you come down to decisions where it's, well, I don't know anything about this person, and I have a slight read on, I have a decent read on this person, but it's town, and this person I know nothing about. Even if like the quiet guy is town, he's going to get himself killed because you don't know anything about him. So it's a bad move for yourself, and it's a bad move for the game. So you
right,
should
and
always contribute whatever you can.
I'm also somewhat against people who, in the early rounds say, hey, I'm just trying to get a read on people, that's why I have nothing to contribute. And then, let's wait a couple rounds and I'll say something. Like, a good example is MLG Ryan. I know that I keep like bringing him up in games saying, his Mafia to town ratio is off, right? And I mean, here's why. Like, he's too much of a danger because in the mid game, I think he's good, right? In the mid game, when he comes out, he usually has good things to contribute, but that means he survives until the third round, and until then, he contributes absolutely nothing, right? And then in the end game, I mean, as town, I mean, his record hasn't been that good, and as Mafia, he actually wins most of the time when he gets that far. So, I mean, what I have to say to people like that is, even if you have nothing to contribute, if you're really town, speak up, say something, put pressure on people so that other people can read you, right? To remove you from the circle of suspicion. Just staying quiet is really not an option, and it's definitely not pro town. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, we can do one more, and then we got to wrap it up and go for real Mafia games. Um, if you're real medic and somebody fake claims as medic, is it worth trying? Is it worth countercalling if you think they're Mafia, or should you stay quiet and try and surprise the Mafia?
um, so this is situational, and you have to do the math. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to almost you like next turn you are going to die if you counterclaim and say you're the actual medic, right? So I mean, there's a couple things you have to factor in. Like, one, when you come out, you better be fucking convincing, because you want there to be no doubt that you're the real medic, right? Two, you have to do the math and see if even if they vote off that guy, right, the fake medic, and then you get killed, can town still win? right? So you have to do the math there, and then make a judgment call.
Hmm. Yeah, it's one of those situations that you can't really give a straight answer to. It's kind of, you have to read the situation pretty well to be able to make that call. Generally, I mean, if you want a general response to that, I would say don't do it in the first 2 or 3 rounds, unless the guy's actually getting away with it. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, if people are, I don't
I
know.
mean, here's the thing though, like it's really hard for Mafia to fake claim early and get away with it because the more rounds you go by and you're not dead,
Hmm.
people are gonna figure it out, So
Yeah. So if someone fakes claims medic and you're the medic, I would give it a few rounds, and if he's not dead, then he's definitely causing trouble, and you come out and somehow wish that you can prove that you're medic. But at that point, if someone's coming out and saying I'm real medic after 2 or 3 rounds of someone that everyone thinks is medic, then it gets questionable. But it's hard. It's hard. Anyway, I think that's it for Mafia Meta. We're gonna throw down the stream for a few minutes, and then we're gonna bring it up with actual Mafia, and we'll see you guys then. All right. See you guys shortly.
all right.